and thank you for the welcome. So I'll just go ahead and get started here. I'll try not to keep you over for lunch, but as we all know in this session, fraud is a persistent problem online. It's continually growing larger, and many scams have a large direct economic impact on people. One common lure that's used by fraudsters is to purport to offer free goods or services. So if you've seen on Facebook or something like that, that you get a free iPad for filling out this survey, this is the type of thing we're talking about. In particular, there's been previous fear raised in studies that these scams might target minors because they don't involve paying money. They ask people to do tasks like providing sensitive information or downloading apps, and ultimately the person receives nothing. So it's both a waste of time, but it also may have other concerns like privacy, invasion, getting spam subsequently, or even installing malware or other unwanted programs in other cases. So while other work has speculated that this might affect minors, more often we wanted to look deeply and see, does this actually affect minors more often? So just to narrow in what I'm talking about here, if you go on YouTube and you search for, here we have free Spotify Premium. If you go on here and you search for this, you'll find sort of tutorials about the Spotify trial, but you'll also find other videos that are attempting to get you to go to a scam website. So taking the case on the left here, which was one of the ones we looked at in our study, you see you have this video, and then it takes you to this alleged coupon website. And then it directs you to do tasks to verify that you're a human. In reality, if you do these tasks, you end up with sort of an endless loop of surveys, and eventually you figure out, oh, I've wasted my time, I've been had. So we wanted to investigate these scams in more detail. Our first research question was, how do users reason about YouTube giveaway scams? Do they recognize that these are scams? Sorry, I couldn't see that it wasn't there. What actions do they recommend taking when they encounter these scams? Secondly, as I alluded to at the beginning, are teenagers, are children, minors legitimately more vulnerable to these? Do they act differently? And, if they do act differently, is that in a way that makes them more vulnerable? So to investigate these questions, we conducted a scenario-based experiment that was intended to mimic the path of victimization. So in particular, we told participants that they were with a friend, and their friend had just searched for free Spotify Premium or free Robux. In reality, the stimuli we collected for this experiment was found in this manner. We just conducted organic searches and found both legitimate and fraudulent stimuli. So participants were assigned to view one of 6 scam and one of 6 legitimate videos. The videos were on the same topic, and they were asked to recommend an action to a friend after viewing the video. They were also shown a screen recording of someone viewing the website. We couldn't direct participants to the actual website for safety reasons, but we showed them a screen recording of somebody viewing the website and sort of clicking through it to get their perception on sort of the second step of victimization. When they go to this website, do they perceive that it's fraudulent? What's their sort of interpretation? And then finally, we had demographic and behavioral questions before and after the survey. So this was meant to contextualize people's responses and also to allow us to investigate other potential confounding variables. In order to recruit participants, most of interest here is how do we recruit teenagers? We distributed a flyer to parents to ensure that nobody took this survey before their parents had consented on their behalf. Adult participants were crowd workers recruited from Prolific. So of course this has implications on sort of, this is a group of people that's more used to taking surveys. So you imagine that may affect their sort of perception of these types of things. We performed statistical testing on to test the effect of age and other variables on the actions people took, and also on a question at the end of the survey after people had seen all the stimuli. We asked them about, did they think it was a scam or not? We saved this till the end because we didn't want to bias participants. So, typical disclaimer, there's more results in the paper. I encourage you to read it, but I'll give a highlight of what we found. Most participants recognized that these were scams. So across all the videos we presented, the sort of rate of recognizing that it was a scam was around 90%, but the most convincing scam had 17% saying it was legitimate, whereas the least convincing scam only had 2% of people saying that it was legitimate. So there's some effect from the stimuli here, what people see, but in general, people recognize these as fraudulent. What action did people recommend because it was fraudulent? Most people recommended just exiting the video, not performing any other interactions with it. As the title of the paper suggests, teens were not more vulnerable than adults, or at least we didn't find evidence of that. Teens were significantly more likely to report searching for some of the terms that we use to look for, or one of the terms that we use to look for scam videos. So in particular, the term free Robux. Teens were 39% of teens versus only 6% of adults had searched for this term previously. So to us, this is, while they may not be more vulnerable upon viewing the scam, they're much more likely to encounter this type of scam because of their interests. As I alluded to, teens had greater interest, so this almost wholly explains or it likely wholly explains the difference between teens and adults. There was no difference in either interest or experience searching for free Spotify Premium between adults and the teenage sample. So, we said people have searched for these previously. What did people find when they searched for these? People found things similar to what we presented in the survey. So, for example, one participant wrote that searching for free Spotify Premium showed me a bunch of websites that contained verification steps, which never worked in giving me access. So this is sort of a similar type of scam. I should note that some people did find legitimate offers that they reported, but many people also had negative experiences. Interestingly, while people, saw that these were fraudulent, many people recommended looking at the comments to sort of verify the claims in the video. So for example, this participant wrote, "I would check comments to see if the video worked for anyone else, and if so, then visit the website on the video." This is probably a bad idea. A lot of the videos we looked in our survey featured sort of fake attestations to provide social proof. In this case, these comments seem a little obvious because they're saying the identical thing right next to each other. So maybe in this case, people would see that and be like, but looking at the comments is probably not a good way to reason about these types of things. Interestingly, teens were more likely to recommend reporting the video to YouTube. So 21% of teens versus 4% of adults suggested reporting the video to YouTube, reporting the scam to YouTube, excuse me. There's limited evidence about why people did this, but one thought from some teens was that they wanted to protect people. So for example, this user wrote, "They should report the video to help others from making bad decisions." Very limited evidence about why people didn't recommend reporting. We only really had one quote where somebody commented on this, but it could reflect disenchantment. As this person wrote, "I wouldn't bother reporting it because I feel actions like that are fighting an uphill battle that have little or no effect." So we've established that people recognize that these are scams. We talked a little bit about the reasoning, but let's look a little bit more about how people came to these conclusions. So the main thing was participants often rejected scams due to the need to do tasks. Many people just recognize that they probably wouldn't get anything if they did this task. For example, this participant wrote, "Completing online offers most likely never gives you what you want." So this may reflect prior experience with these types of scams or just general knowledge. Some people pointed to more specific security and privacy risks. So for example, this person wrote, "Because it says download apps, it's obviously a scam. Everyone with slight common sense should know that downloading apps, random apps, and opening links can give you a virus." Those who disengaged didn't necessarily recognize that it was a scam. So for example, some people felt like it was just too much work. So this participant wrote, "It's too much hassle for what you get. I'm sure they're getting plenty from you for signing up. Not worth it." And the last thing I want to note in terms of reasoning is that participants often base their decision on sort of the aesthetic qualities of the website. So for example, one of the scams that people most obviously recognized was this one, and this participant wrote, "Looks suspiciously like the Nigerian prince scam was here. The website looks old and clunky. Quite frankly, at this point, I would give my friend $5 so they could buy the Robux." So, for really obvious scams, things with fake download links, like things like this, this may be an effective strategy, but when you look at maybe more convincing websites that scammers have put more effort into, this is maybe a less reliable strategy. So just to summarize and draw some final conclusions, most users are resistant to these types of scams, but they may rely on some unreliable heuristics like looking at the comments or focusing on aesthetic qualities. Because of the difference between teens and adults, we think it may be possible to motivate more people to report these videos to YouTube. Clicked the wrong button there. Teens are not necessarily more vulnerable, but they may be more likely to encounter these types of scams because of their interests and also their lack of money and need to find free ways to access these things. And then finally, the best solution is to crack down on the scammer's ability to post on YouTube rather than relying on users to make these decisions. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
Hi, Chris Fennell, Walmart Global Tech. One of the things that I'm curious about is, in your paper you had mentioned household income. And it seemed like 30% of your teenagers were in a lower demographic, and then you had 30% of teenagers in a higher demographic. Did you find any differences between if I'm coming from a affluent family, I might not have money, but my family has money, and they can spend money on Roblox. But did you find any differences in between household income?
Yeah, we didn't find any statistically significant differences based on household income. It's important to note saying that 20% so we asked parents to report demographic features. 20% of parents didn't report household income. And because of our recruitment method, I think there's a little bit of a bias towards higher income families.
Sure.
Just because a lot of the people who were recruited were people known already to the researchers. We did recruit more broadly to make a more diverse sample, but
was it snowball sampling? Was it snowball?
We used a combination of snowball sampling, and then we also distributed flyers more broadly across the U.S. using Peach Jar.
Okay.
Yeah,
really fascinating work. This is it's very prevalent to what we work with in terms of gift cards. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, very cool. Can you go back one slide?
What, sorry?
Just go back one slide.
I don't have the slides anymore.
Never mind. So I think a classic question is, how would you defend against it, right? I think you kind of hinted a little bit at the end, which is sort of offloading the work to YouTube. But in our work that we look at cryptocurrency scams on YouTube, what we found is the scammers able to get thousands and thousands of accounts through, hijacking all kinds of things. So I'm just wondering, what are the other sort of venues for prevention, right? It seems like reporting, it's hard. Even if you report it, right, it's hard to sort of verify if a scam is a scam, right? Because it might be the case that if you download 3 apps, you actually get something. So what are some of the venues for defense, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Besides this one.
Yeah. So I focus on what YouTube might do in this talk. In the paper, we discuss more the infrastructure of these types of scam depends on obvious service providers like Cloudflare and Amazon Web Services, but a lot of these scams also use what's called cost per action advertising providers, and these are sort of their method of monetization. It's what has you download the apps and they get a commission. Some of these providers are seem to be actively involved, like they know people are committing fraud. And so taking down these sort of action providers, or even addressing it upstream, I think is also a good way and probably more effective. Yeah.
So you're saying there's a whole ecosystem around it, and
yeah, there's a whole ecosystem that somebody who's better at measurement doesn't do human subjects work. This is encouragement for future work, I guess. But there's a lot of stuff to look at in scammers' discussions about how they do these that I think would be very interesting to dive into. But that could be an avenue of attacking it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one last question. Have you thought about the Facebook Marketplace and how the scams are going on in these areas?
So
Or Meta Marketplace now?
Meta Marketplace, yeah, so e-commerce scams, as we saw at the top, are very prevalent. I do have like some work in submission looking at sort of discussion of scams on Reddit, and we found that there was a lot of discussion of sort of these e-commerce buyer scams where they send a fake check or other things like this. We haven't looked at any sort of user studies to see, how people interpret these or what, what effective mitigations may be, but that's definitely a direction for future work.
Great, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Elijah and the other authors.